Joining us again on B2BG video podcasts. On the road again, part back in 39 and a half.
Yeah, sounds about right. It's been definitely been too long.
Yeah.
As a precursor, we do have some amazing people who've jumped on board with us and taken some responsibilities away, so we can hopefully do these more again.
Yeah, which we've been saying, but we're trying. We're making
saying for the last year, but now it looks like it's a possibility.
Looks like a possibility. We do have some bad news. Our good friend Armand, which we're going to put up another. We're going to reissue the podcast we did.
Yeah, it's a two-part.
Yeah, we did a video of him, Armand Comire, paratrooper with the 101st Vietnam veteran. He recently passed, so that's it's a sad week for us. It's been about a week, so we've been processing that, and we thought we'd talk about the death of a veteran and a fellow veteran and brother to us, and what that means in the veteran community, I'd say, and for those who are patriots, I suppose.
No, absolutely, and as much as we're mourning, how important it has been for our community to rally around his spouse, his widow.
Yeah.
Which you and I were talking about. For the first probably 5 or 6 days, she was pretty numb to it until certain things started catching her attention.
Yeah.
And then it really affected her.
And like anything else that happens in someone's life, that's a major event. That's sad, especially. You've heard of the stages of grief.
Oh yeah.
And I think his widow was going through those stages, and we could see it. And she's close to us. She was a former board member of ours, and absolutely one of our major benefactors in the beginning. And like you said, she was numb at first, kind of smiling a little bit in shock, and we kind of knew that eventually it was going to hit her, and it finally has hit her, and she's feeling the grief.
She is, but and we talked about this too, how important it is for her to not feel like she's all alone, like to remind her that he was a huge part of our lives as far as personally and with Veterans Group. He did the best he could to be involved as much as he could for all the things he had going against him. But it's important for anybody in a tragic situation to feel like they have some support, at least at the beginnings, to help them get through the beginning parts of that aspect of life.
Yeah, and we definitely we've been helping her clear out some of his things and sell some of his things and help her process, most importantly, process his absence. I think that's the big thing. Our motto is family through service, right? And
Absolutely.
We have to be there and show her our support, and that, like you said, and show her that we're still there for her. And one of the things we do, in case you folks didn't know, is that we do offer our support for widows of veterans. Like with VA benefits, you can't have remarried, because that makes you ineligible for VA benefits, and it would make you ineligible typically for our benefits. But if you're a widow or a widower, you are eligible for our benefits under most circumstances.
Yeah.
So, she's having a tough time, but I think she's processing, and I'd like to think that we're helping her through that process.
Yeah, I'm confident in that. She had people over there helping her organize and move stuff out that she'd never met before. Like, yeah, she knows you, me, she knows Jody, but Spencer, who's one of our friends and also an alternate on our board, he was there. There was at least 2 other people she had never met. So she felt that comfort of, you're not alone through this. Like, we see you want to get this stuff out so you don't have to continue with the burden. whether it be emotional or physically having to move this stuff yourself, we're going to help get you through that.
Yeah, and I think that's a major part of it because, when people feel grief, they get tired more quickly. They're mentally tired, physically tired. They get exhausted, and they just get overwhelmed. And we can see she's overwhelmed with things. So we're helping her both as being a presence in her life, being her friend, frankly.
Yeah.
And helping her in the physical aspect of, I hate to put it this way, but removing Armand's things from his section of the home because it needs to be removed. So and it's tough for us too. And she asked for it. She wants it removed.
But we have some things in mind about doing something really nice to give her down in the future to kind of help as a positive reminder.
Well, she might watch our videos, so we should.
Well, that's why I'm not giving any more details.
So Sherry, if you're watching, we're not going to tell you yet. We'll actually show it. You should show it when it's done. I agree.
So, what was your first interaction with Armand? Do you remember?
I do remember. I do remember my first interaction with Armand. My first interaction with him was maybe close to 20 years ago when we first moved up here. I went to the end of my driveway because a thunderstorm was brewing. The clouds were sort of roiling in the sky, and I went out to look at the clouds and was checking them out. And he was a direct neighbor at the time, and he came over and he kind of walked over towards the driveway and he said, "Oh, hey, I heard you were in the 101st Airborne, and I was too." And he kind of tried to engage me in conversation in that regard, and I frankly didn't really want to hear it. I was busy, so I sort of gave him the cold shoulder. I was like, yeah, I wasn't rude, but I wasn't polite either. I was
You're in your own world.
I was in my own world. Yeah. Maybe, I guess it was kind of rude looking at it in retrospect, but I wasn't intending to be rude. So he was like, all right, well, fuck this guy, and so he left. And that was my first interaction with Armand. And then the next interaction with Armand following that was like a week later. I saw him outside mowing the lawn or something. I said, "Hey, Armand." I said, "Oh, you were in the 101st, you were saying the other day." And he looked at me like, why is this guy talking to me? Like, I thought he kind of blew me off. And he came over and was like, yeah. And so we got to talking, and that kicked off our relationship from there. And he told me later, he's like, "I thought this guy was an asshole." Talking about me, because he was like, "Oh, this guy was like, screw you, I don't have any time for you." But I was occupied. I didn't intend to blow him off in the way that I did. So that was mine. What about you?
Mine was as interesting as at your house. Took a lot for us. The intimate in and out of our lives. But once you and I were friends, is pretty much anybody who was friends with Eric, I was friends with. So we were doing some over your house, I think a cookout or something. And he came over, which he would often do, just arrive. And I just remember, he kind of sat or stood between us and completely interrupted our conversation and started talking to you. And I'm like, so I kind of got myself more involved in the conversation. And once he realized that I was a veteran and you and I were more than just, we were actually friends and stuff. And it really got him to open up about who he was and some of the things he'd been through. It was like a whole nother. But at first I was thinking about him, man, what an asshole. Really? I would smack my kids for interrupting a conversation.
Here, look at my back when I start talking to Eric. So, Armand was an interesting character. He had his ways. He was born in the 50s, so he had a lot of those, what we would consider today to be quirks and foibles and things like that. So he's an interesting character. He lived a very rich life. Very rich.
Yes.
Paratrooper, state police, local cop. He raced motorcycles, and all the things he talks about on his interview with us.
Yeah.
He was a very interesting character, very rich in stories, and he lived a full life.
Indeed. And when people talk about that saying, you can't teach old dogs new tricks, I always think of Armand as a perfect example of how that's not true.
Right.
Because even when I first met Armand, I did notice that he had some issues that he was a little outspoken about sometimes when it came to certain things race-wise.
Yes,
But,
he did.
You know, and I know you confronted him a few times morally because you didn't want that in front of your kids and stuff. But
Yeah.
as we did more digging on his background, what he grew up with, and then what happened to him in Vietnam, and finding out, not that it's right, like, don't get me wrong, there's never really a good reason to be racist, but you look at the time period, the stuff that happened to him when he was in Vietnam, it's at least could be understood that there's context there more at the end.
Than just being racist.
You take that, and then you look at who he was and the way he reacted in our family functions as we did more stuff. And how him saying derogatory terms and stuff almost ceased. Like
around us.
Yeah, completely. And you could see him
after we told him, like,
engage.
hey, you gotta stop, you can't say that stuff, and
And then he would engage in conversations with us too, which is interesting because you were told by your soldier mates that you ain't white. You know,
they did say you ain't white.
So there are some dynamics there that you really got to see this guy who spent most of his life living a certain way turn a page. But you are one of the two last people he contacted, and he asked you to do him a favor that you never thought he would ever ask for, and reaching out to the church.
Father Ryan, Amazon,
So how did that go? That was a little different.
He asked me if I could reach out to Father Ryan and have Father Ryan come talk to him at the very end. And I said, yeah, I will, but I didn't want to say I'll check with Sherry, but I just want to make sure that Sherry wouldn't turn Father Ryan away at the door. So after Armand asked me, I said, Sherry, Armand asked if Father Ryan could come over and talk to him, and Sherry said, yes, I would like that as well. So I contacted Father Ryan, and he went over, and and everything turned out well. And
but it's interesting because he was a guy that had nothing nice to say about any church.
Yeah.
So to be able to come into these self-revelations is so huge.
Yeah, I think Armand was a very dynamic and complicated man.
Yes.
He had but he spent a lot of time thinking, and he had a lot of time to think and ponder things. And I think towards the end, after speaking with him for the last couple of years, he always joked and he said, I gotta make it to 80. I don't want to be the guy who dies at 79. So, and God bless you, Armand, you sure did. You made it to 80. But he had a lot of time to think about how he wanted to present himself after he died, and how he wanted to be. And I think when Armand died, he passed away knowing he did everything he could do to be right with God and with himself.
And I think that's some of the hardest part, right? Is forgiving yourself for certain aspects. But one of the last things I encountered I had with him was special to me because his daughter's grown up, has her own kids who are almost adults. But we were doing one of our yard sales, and he came over and he talked to Abigail, your daughter, who is only like 16 or 17, and the way he approached her, the way he talked to her as almost in a grandfather love type of way, is something I had never seen. He was a crusty, hard old man. To see a softer side of, and it's funny because I hear that now from Spencer when I hang out with his kid, but to see it with a guy who grew up with so much baggage, all the hardships and everything he's endured and he overcame, and then the loving, fatherly, family conversation he would have with her and talk to her about staying away from certain kinds of guys and being respectful to you and Jen and all those things. It's like
Armand loves women, right? And he loved his daughter, and he loved Abigail, and he always wanted to protect people, and he always wanted to protect women especially. And that's what you always talked about, right?
Yeah.
The American male wanted to protect the women. And he came from a generation when it was really,
Yes.
really important. Even
Yes.
more so probably than now, where the generations are taught whatever. But in his generation, it was always like, protect the women at all costs, right? So like he always spoke to me about his main goals in life are protecting his wife, Sherry, and protecting his daughter, Danielle, period, at all costs. And for Abigail, she was an extension of me
Completely.
as a friend of his. So in his mind, not only was she a woman to be protected, she was a friend to be protected, right?
And you and I talk about it all the time, our friendship, how we're family. You know, I will love and support your kids as quickly as I will to correct them as you would with mine.
Right.
And he was the same way. But to see him with Abigail, it was a different notch of who he was.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just makes me feel good that despite all the flaws he has and all of us do have, to look back and know I had a guy in my life and that we were friends with, that we got to kind of boast about, and that we made videos about, and we still talk stories about.
Wrote articles about him too.
You know, it's something that more people in our generation and more recent generations are losing out in with the elders, is having that relationship.
Yeah. So Armand, we miss you, and we'll see you.
Godspeed.
Godspeed. Love you, Armand. Goodbye.